Throughout the course, we have used timestamps quite a bit. We've generated them in the To-Do app, and we also have them generated for all of our messages in the Chat app, but we've never gone as far as formatting them to something human readable. That's going to be the topic in this video, and in the next one, we'll put that into action. By the end of the next video, we'll have a formatted message area with the name, timestamp, and message, and we'll have some better styles for it as well. Now in this one, it's going to be all about time and timestamp. We're not going to make any changes to the front end of our app. We're simply going to learn how time works inside of Node. Now to explore this, we're going to create a new Playground file over inside of Atom. We're going to make a Playground folder to store this file. And inside of the Playground directory, we can make a new file calling it time.js. And in here, we'll play around with time. And we'll take what we learn here into the front end of the application in the next video. Now, we are no strangers to timestamps. We know they're nothing more than just integers, whether positive or negative. Something like 781 is a perfectly valid timestamp. So is something like minus a couple billion or whatever this number happens to be, all valid. Even 0 is a perfectly valid timestamp. Now, all of these numbers, they're all relative to a certain moment in history referred to as the Unix epoch, which is January 1st, 1970 at midnight, 0 hours, 0 minutes, and 0 seconds AM. This is stored in UTC, which means it's time zone independent. Now, a timestamp 0 actually represents this moment in history perfectly, and positive numbers like 1000 head into the future, while negative numbers like minus 1000 head into the past. Minus 1000 as a timestamp would represent December 31st, 1969 at 11:59 and 59 seconds. We've gone 1 second into the past from here. Now, these timestamps inside of JavaScript, they're stored in milliseconds since the Unix epoch. Inside of regular Unix timestamps, they're actually stored in seconds. Since we are using JavaScript in this course, we will always be using milliseconds as our timestamp values, which means that a timestamp like this, 1000, represents 1 second into January 1st, since there's 1000 milliseconds in a second. A value like 10,000 would be 10 seconds into this day, and so on and so forth. Now, the problem for us was never getting the timestamp. Getting the timestamp was really easy. All we had to do was call new date, calling its getTime method. Things are going to get a lot harder, though, when we want to format a human-readable value like the one we have above. We're going to want to print something to the screen inside of our web app that's not just the timestamp. We're going to want to print something like maybe 5 minutes ago, letting a user know the message was sent 5 minutes ago, or maybe you want to print the actual date with the month, day, hour, minute, and AM or PM value. Regardless of what you want to print, we are going to need to talk a bit about formatting, and this is where the default date object falls short. Yes, there are methods that allow you to get the specific values out of a date, like the year, the month, or the day of month, but they are very limited, and it is a huge burden to customize something like what we have above. To talk about exactly the problem, let's go ahead and pull up the documentation for date by Googling MDN date. This is going to bring us to the Mozilla Developer Network documentation page for date, which is a really great set of documentation. Down below, we have access to all of the methods available. These are all methods kind of like getTime that return something specific about the date. For example, we have a getDate method that returns the day of the month, a value from 1 to 31. We have something like getMinutes, which returns the current minutes for the timestamp. All of these exist inside of date. Now, the problem is that these are really unflexible. For example, inside of Atom, we have this little date right here. It's a shorthand version for January. Now, we can get the actual month. To show you how, we'll create a variable called date. We'll go ahead and create a new date, and then we're going to go ahead and call a method. I'm going to use console.log to print the value to the screen, and we're going to call date.getMonth. GetMonth, as defined over inside of the documentation, is going to return a 0-based month value from 0 to 11, where 0 is January and 11 is December. Over inside of the terminal, I'm going to kick off our app using NodeMon since we're going to be restarting it quite a bit. NodeMon, it's in the playground folder, not the server folder, and the file itself is called time.js. Once it's up and running, we see we get 8 back, which is expected. It's currently September 22nd, 2016, and a 0 indexed value for September would be 8, even though you commonly think of it as 9. Now, this is fine. We have the number 8, but getting an actual string, Jan or January, is going to be much more difficult. There is no built-in way to get this value, which means if you do want to get that value, you're going to have to create an array. Maybe you call the array months, and you store all of the values like this. This is going to be fine, and it might not seem like that big of a deal for month, but things get just as confusing for the day of the month, like the first we have here. All we can really get back is the number 1. Actually formatting it to first, second, or third is going to be much more difficult. There just are not a good set of methods for formatting your date. Things get even more complex when you want to have a relative time string, something like 3 minutes ago. It would be nice to print that inside of the web app alongside of the message. Printing the actual month, the day, and the year is not particularly useful. It would be cool if we could say, hey, this message was sent 3 hours ago, 3 minutes ago, or 3 years ago, like a lot of chat applications do. Now, when you get into formatting like this, your first instinct is usually to create some utility methods that help with formatting a date, but there is no need to do that because what we're going to look at in this video is a fantastic time library called Moment. Moment is pretty much the only library of its kind. It is universally accepted as the go-to library for working with time in JavaScript. I've never worked on a Node or front-end project that didn't have Moment used. It is truly essential when you're working with dates in any capacity. Now, in order to show off why Moment is so great, we are going to first install it over inside of the terminal. Then we're going to play around with all of its capabilities. It has a lot. Right here, we can install it by running npm i. I'm going to go ahead and use the current version, Moment, at version 2.15.1, and I will also use the save flag to add it as a dependency that we're going to need on Heroku as well as locally. Now, once it's installed, I can use clear to clear the terminal output, and we can go ahead and restart NodeMon. Over inside of the playground, it's time to require Moment and take a look at exactly what it can do for us. To kick things off, let's go ahead and try to fix the problem we tried to solve with date. We want to print the shorthand version of a month like Jan, Feb, and so on. The first step is going to be to comment this out and load in Moment up above, requiring it. I'm going to make a variable called Moment and require it by requiring the Moment library. Then down below, we'll kick things off by making a new Moment. Now, just like we create a new date to get a specific date object, we're going to do the same thing with Moment. I'm going to call this variable date, and we're going to set it equal to a call to Moment, the function we loaded in above, without any arguments. This creates a new Moment object that represents the current point in time. From here, we can go ahead and try to format things using its really useful format method. The format method is one of the main reasons I just love Moment. It makes it dead simple to print whatever you want as a string. Now, in this case, we have access to our date, and we're going to go ahead and call that method I just talked about format. Before we get into what we pass to format, let's go ahead and run it just like this. When we do that, over inside of the terminal, NodeMon is going to go ahead and restart itself. And right here we have our formatted date. We have the year, the month, the day, and other values. It's not still really user-friendly, but it is a step in the right direction. The real power of the format method comes when you pass a string inside of it. Now, what we pass inside of here is patterns, which means that we have access to a specific set of values we can use to output certain things. We're going to explore all of the patterns available to you in just a second. For now, let's go ahead and just use one. It's the triple uppercase M pattern. When Moment sees this pattern inside of format, it's going to go ahead and grab the shorthand version of the month, which means if I save this file, restarting it over inside of the terminal once again, we should see the shorthand version for the current month, September, which would be SEP. Right here, we have SEP just as expected, and we were able to do that super simply by using format. Now, format returns a string that has just the things you specify. Here, we only specified that we want the shorthand version of the month, so all we got back was the shorthand version of the month. We could also add on another pattern for Ys, which prints out the full year. In the current case, it would print out 2016 in numbers. I'm going to go ahead and save time again, and right here we get SEP 2016. Now, Moment has a fantastic set of documentation, so you can use whatever patterns you like. Over inside of the browser, we can pull it up by going to moment.js.com. The documentation for Moment is fantastic. It's available on the docs page. And to get started, in order to figure out how to use format, we're going to go to this display section. The first item in display is format. There's a few examples about how to use format, but the really useful information is what we have down below. Here we have all of the tokens that we can put inside of the string to format our day as we like. Up above, you can see you can use as many of these tokens as you like to create really complex date outputs. Now, we already explored two. We explored M, which is defined right here under the month header. As you can see, there are 5 different ways to represent the month. The for Y pattern, which we used for year, is defined down below. There's 3 ways to use year. We just explored one of them. And there are sections for everything: year, day of week, day of month, AM, PM, hour, minute, second. All of those are defined right here, and all of them can be put inside of format just like we did for the current values. Now, in order to explore this just a little more, let's head back into Atom and take advantage of some of these. What we're going to try to do is print what we have right here: the shorthand month and the year, which we already have, but now we need the day of the month formatted like first, second, third, as opposed to 1, 2, 3. In order to do that, what I would do if I had not used Moment before is I would look in the docs for the day of month section, which happens to be sitting right here, and I look at the available options. I have the D pattern, which prints 1 through 31. I also have DO, and that prints what we want: first, second, third, so on and so forth. And we also have double uppercase D, which prints the number with a 0 in front of it for the values less than 10. Now, in this case, we want to use this pattern, so all we have to do is type it over inside of format. I'm going to open up the terminal and Atom so we can see it refresh in the background, and we're going to type DO right here, saving the file. When it restarts, what do we get? We get September 22nd, 2016, which is indeed correct. Now, we can also add other characters in here, like a comma. A comma is not part of the patterns that format expects, so it's simply going to pass it through, which means right here, the comma gets shown just as we typed it in: September 22nd, comma, 2016. Using format in this way, we have a lot of flexibility as to how we want to print the date. Now, format is just one of many methods. There are a ton of methods on Moment for doing just about anything, although I find I use pretty much the same 6 in most of my projects. There really isn't a lot of need for most of them, although they do exist because they are useful in certain situations. To take a quick peek at some other things Moment can do, let's head back into the docs and go to the Manipulate section. The first 2 methods defined under Manipulate are add and subtract. This lets you easily add and subtract time, as you can see here. We can call add, adding 7 days, and we can call subtract, subtracting 7 months. Down below, you can get a quick idea about what you can add and subtract: years, quarters, months, weeks. Pretty much any unit of time can be added or subtracted. Now, to take a look at what exactly that does to the timestamp, we can go ahead and add and subtract some values. Right here, I'm going to call it date.add, and we're going to go ahead and add a year by putting 1 in as the value and year in as the unit. Now, it doesn't matter if you use the single or plural version, both are going to work the same. Here you can see we get 2017 in the terminal. If I change it to year singular, I also get that same value. We can add as many years as we like. I'm going to go ahead and add 100 years, and now we're at 2116. Same thing is true with subtract. We can chain on the call, or we can add it as a separate statement. I'm going to subtract 9 months, just like this. And we are currently in September, and when we subtract 9 months, we go back to December. Now, you notice we went from 2116 to 2115 because subtracting those 9 months required us to change years. Moment is really great at handling just about anything you throw at it. Now, your challenge for this video is going to be to play around with format a little more. I'm going to give you the output I would like, and you will need to figure out which patterns to use over inside of the documentation to get that output. Now, the current time as I'm filming this is 10:35. On my iPhone, it looks like this: 10:35, and it is in the AM, so I have a lowercase am sitting right here. Your goal is to print a format like this. Now, obviously, if it's 12:15 when you run the code, you're going to see 12:15 as opposed to 10:35. It's just the format that matters. The actual values aren't that important. Now, as you'll see, when you try to print hours and minutes, you're going to have a lot of options. For both of them, you're going to have a padded version like 01 or an unpadded version like 1. I want you to use the padded version for minutes and the unpadded version for hours, which would be 6 like this and 01. If you padded the hour, it looks kind of weird, and if you don't pad the minute, it looks just terrible. So we would want to print something like this if it happened to be 6:01 a.m. Now for hour, you're also going to have the option to do either 1 to 12 or 1 to 24. I usually use a 12-hour clock, so I'm going to do that using AM right here. Before I set you free, I am going to comment out the code above. I would like you to write everything from scratch just below. So take some time, create a new moment date, and call format printing the value to the screen. You should see something formatted like this. Test it out, and when you're done, go ahead and click play. Hopefully you were able to find all of the necessary patterns to print this to the screen. To kick things off, I am going to make a new date by calling moment with no arguments, and we're also going to go ahead and call format inside of console.log so we can print that formatted value to the screen. Date.format. Inside of here, we're going to provide our pattern. We're going to start with the unpadded hour and the padded minute. We can grab both of those patterns by heading over to the docs, going back to display, and taking a peek. If we scroll down below, the first one we're going to run into is hour right here, and we have quite a few options. We have 24-hour options, we have 1 through 12. What we want is lowercase h, which is 1 through 12 unpadded. The padded version, which is 2 lowercase h's, exists right below. That is not what we want for this one. Right here, we're going to kick things off by adding an H. I'm also going to save the file, check it out in the terminal, and right here we have 10, which looks great. Next up is that padded minute. We're going to go ahead and find that pattern just below. For a minute, we have a lot fewer options, either padded or unpadded. We want to use 2 lowercase m's. Now, before I add those 2 m's, I am going to add a colon. This is going to get passed through in plain text, meaning it's not going to get changed. Right here, we're going to add our 2 lowercase m's. We can then save time.js and make sure the correct thing prints in the terminal, and it does. 1038 shows up right here. Next up is going to be grabbing that lowercase am and pm value. We can find that pattern over inside of Google Chrome, just above hour. Here we can either use uppercase A for uppercase am and pm, or lowercase a for the lowercase version. I'm going to go ahead and use a lowercase a after a space to use that lowercase version. I can save the file, and over inside of the terminal, I do indeed have 1039 printing to the screen. We have the AM after it. Everything looks great. If you completed the challenge successfully, you should be seeing something just like this. That is it for this video. In the next one, we're going to actually integrate Moment into our server and our client rather than just having it in a playground file. Stay tuned. I will see you then.